Kurt, you ready?
Oh, we're ready.
All right. Welcome everyone to our meeting tonight. We appreciate everyone coming out. We hope that everyone is cleaning up from the storm. That was quite a weird event, whatever they're going to label it, as a survivor of the 2006 microburst. I found it terrifying, but I hope everyone's okay after it. So let's go on to our agenda. I did want to point out that a couple items, one of them has been moved to the regular agenda item, so if you're here for the 19th and Iowa underpass, we'll definitely be having discussion about that item under our regular agenda. We do have agendas in the back by the back door if anyone wants to follow along with what we're doing. So we don't have any recognition proclamations, so we'll go right into the consent agenda. All matters listed below on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Members of the public wishing to speak to an item that has been pulled off the consent agenda will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. And so, Sherry, do I need to say that we already removed that, or has it already been struck?
It's already removed.
Okay. Is there an item that a member of the commission wishes to remove? Okay. Is there an item that a member of the public wishes to remove? Which one would you like to remove?
Item 12,
Okay. Number 12.
special use permit for 401.
Okay. Any other items? Yes, Dan?
Item 16, Mayor,
Okay. And which one is that one?
the House of Session.
Okay. So number 12 and number 16. Any other items? Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exclusion of items 12 and 16 and including claims. We have total vendors, 219, for a total dollar amount of $16,878,468. And there were 3 payments over $1 million. One to the state treasurer, one to Garney Companies, and one to 360 Energy Engineers.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Herbert, seconded by Vice Mayor Boley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, so let's go on to number 12, and that is to approve a special use permit for manufacturing and production limited and retail general and non-ground floor dwelling uses at 401 Elm Street. So Miss, if you want to come up and sign in and say your name for the record. And
Hello, I'm Margreta DeFries. I'm the applicant for the special use permit. And am I also limited to only 3 minutes since it's my application?
what did you want to talk about?
The hours of operation are the primary item that I'd like to discuss before it gets approved. But
Okay,
I did
so-
have a previous presentation about the history of the building if you're interested in it.
Okay, so what do you want to say about the hours of operation?
The Planning Commission recommended that it be limited to 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And it is a woodworking shop, but the level of noise in the shop, I actually recorded it today, hits 90 decibels inside the building, and across the street, still in the street, it is 60, which when I look up, it's about the level of a vacuum cleaner across the street. And so I think that limiting the hours of operation to 7 to 9 will be extremely limiting for anybody who I might rent the workshop to, especially in the summertime when daylight hours and the heat of the day in the Kansas summer might prevent them from being able to work during the day. Many processes in the shop don't require machines, and I think that if they can work into the evening when it's cooler in order to do things that require cooler temperatures, that would be a plus for whoever is renting the shop.
Did you have another item that you wanted to contest, or just that one?
That is the only part of the recommendation that I
Okay,
actually...
well, let's hear from staff then.
There, we've got a few slides to present. We had some heads up from Ms. DeVries that she may pull this, so we were prepared with a brief presentation.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Becky Pepper. I'm with the Planning Department.
The subject property is located at 401 Elm Street, which is in the North Lawrence neighborhood. It's located in the northeast corner of 4th Street and Elm Street. It's currently zoned RS5, which is a single dwelling residential zoning district, as are the properties to the east, west, and south. There is general industrial zoning to the north. Also shown on this slide are the existing land uses in the area. The yellow color represents single-family development. There is multifamily development here as illustrated with the brown. And then this blue color located south west of the subject property indicates a local neighborhood church. There are also some commercial developments that are located northeast and northwest of the property, which are shown by the red color. The subject property is developed with a 2-story building. The rear portion of the building contains the woodworking shop. There is a vacant residential development located on the 1st floor near the front of the building, and then there's an occupied residential unit on the 2nd floor. This woodworking shop, which is classified as a manufacturing and production limited use in our land development code, as well as this 2nd floor dwelling, these are uses that are not permitted in the RS5 zoning district. And as such, there are 2 related items that are on the consent agenda: this rezoning request to rezone the property from the RS5 zoning district to the MU zoning district, as well as the text amendment to our land development code. So the rezoning request was initiated by the property owner as a means to bring those non-conforming existing land uses into compliance. And through the rezoning request, the Planning Commission initiated a text amendment that would permit non-residential uses in certain parts of the mixed-use development through approval of a special use permit. Now, the special use permit process provides a mechanism to evaluate proposed development with the compatibility of an existing area. Given that the subject property is located in a single-family residential area, staff recommended conditions that align with the home occupation standards of our land development code. These conditions, which are listed here, relate to exterior storage of materials and exterior fabrication, the maximum noise level associated with the manufacturing and production use, and then the types of delivery trucks and time allotted for those deliveries. The home occupation standards also provide a condition for the hours of operation, which are between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. The Planning Commission recommended that the hours of operation associated with the manufacturing and production limited use be extended from the 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. These are your action items related to the special use permit. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
So just to reiterate, so the Planning Commission is the one that recommended 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And that's in the special use permit now, as proposed.
Correct. Planning Commission recommended that staff started with the recommendation that it be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. to align with that home occupation standards. Planning Commission recommended that be extended from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Okay.
What's the standard timeframes for noise ordinance in Lawrence? Is there some other timeframes?
Oh, you have another
There's
one?
a standard associated with it.
Okay.
In terms of time standard, there are some exceptions to the noise ordinance dealing with construction and different things, but there's no exception.
Thanks.
What is the timeframe request that you have?
Come on up to the microphone.
I would prefer not to limit it because of the fact that the building is not climate controlled in that section. But an alternate would be to revise it that the machines couldn't be used after 9 p.m. Because certainly many of the things that I would imagine a person doing later in the evening don't require the machines, and that would give them a little bit more leeway. If you used, for example, 1,000 RPMs, that would actually limit about 2/3 of the machines that could be used.
So you would like for the possibility of being allowed just to be open but not necessarily using the machines? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I would say that that would be a way to limit the noise, but not limit the person from working, whoever is renting it.
So is that what those times limited the hours of operation?
The way it's worded, it would limit the hours of operation for the facility. One of the things that we didn't share some pictures, it has a garage door that opens up because it is not air conditioned. There's some air movement required in the warmer months. So our concern and just alignment with the home occupation standards was that the nearby residents had some relief at some point from the noise coming out of a fairly noisy operation, or potential to be fairly noisy.
Question from Becky. If we approve this as is tonight, the applicant would still have the opportunity to have a new public hearing on revised hours?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
If we approve it as is tonight, the applicant would have a subsequent opportunity to have a public hearing on revised hours of operation?
Correct. It would go through the process again, Planning Commission and approval by City Commission, correct.
Any other questions? Okay, let's see if we have any other public comment from anyone in the audience. Does anyone have any comment on this item?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. I spoke on this 401 Elm previously. I knew Margaretta's father, who owned and operated a woodworking antique repair back there, and I have to say, living a block away from it, I never had any complaints from any neighbors from noise or traffic. It's a very low volume. That's not to say that somebody go in there and it becomes very popular and have the retail up front and the whatever woodworking in the back, art studios, stained glass. This type of building is in demand in Lawrence. These buildings are suited for mom and pop businesses. And like I spoke to Margaretta about it to talk to her neighbors, and if her neighbors are happy with it, then everybody's happy with it. And I always tell her, noise complaints, we still got codes, Brian Mendez, who can take care of that situation. So we never had any complaints when her father was there, so doing the woodworking. So I would say, approve the multiple use, the extended hours till 9 o'clock, especially in the summertime. Everybody's out still doing everything. So in the wintertime, when it's cold, you're going to have that garage door shut. So thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Any other public comment? Come on up to the microphone and sign in and say your name.
I'm Natalia Lowther, and I'm a North Lawrence resident. I've not nearby there, but I've known Margaretta's father and been around the shop there for many years. And I've also been around a lot of other small woodworking shops, and I would really like to emphasize that using machines is the tiniest part of creating fine furniture, cabinets, whatever. For a custom shop like that, a lot of the work is the design, the planning, the laying out, the cutting things together, putting things together, finishing. A lot of activities that if the door were closed, no one would even know anyone was working there. There would be no noise impact. And I think it's could be frustrating to someone to be limited from doing anything at all there, even sitting there doing the paperwork outside of restricted hours. I think a limit on the machines that can be run or a limit on the noise level in terms of decibels or subject to no complaints by immediate neighbors is reasonable for the noise portion of it, but there's so many activities that don't require noise that I feel should not be limited. Thank you.
Thank you, Talia. Any other public comment on this item?
Scott, is that a possibility that to approve it on a probationary status pending no complaints?
Well, I think what we would prefer is something more framed, more objective, so that if we get enforcement complaints, we can go out and see if they're operating a certain way. Leaves a little bit to risk doing it otherwise. We could rewrite the condition to link it to machines audible off-site, if that's the preference. This is the first reading of the ordinance, so we could do that and bring it back for you for the second reading, if that's your pleasure.
I had a question about the hours. Do other businesses in North Lawrence have hour restrictions that are zoned similar or light industrial or?
They would if they were home occupations registered with us, through us. I can't recall one that we've worked on that we've had to enforce the hours of operation. Generally, businesses don't have hours of operation because they have the correct zoning for it. Again, this is a special use permit, so you have a discretionary function on this application to create a framework that it's compatible with adjacent uses where it may not otherwise be without conditions.
Scott, we would have the opportunity, the commission would have the opportunity that if it felt that there were violations occurring under the special use permit to rehear that item, right?
The code provides for a revocation process that usually would be complaint-driven. We would bring that forth as an enforcement action to you to either suspend or revoke the special use permit or modify conditions associated with it.
So
That would
we
be an
al-
action the city would take, not the owner.
Right, so we always have that opportunity to be
Yes,
able
sir.
to do that. Let me ask one other question. The woodworking shop that's in East Lawrence, they're on Haskell, I think it is, or maybe not even on.
11th and Haskell?
11th and Haskell. Was that a mixed use, or was that a zoning, or did we put hours of operation on that?
Commissioner Amix,
business?
I don't recall the details. That has industrial zoning, though. We may have through the site plan process because it brought with it a number of neighborhood issues.
Okay.
I just don't
But I
recall.
can see that being a similar kind of business, similar use. I would suggest that, we could proceed with, an approval of some type, whether it be extending of hours here, and then if there's ask for that information to be provided, because I think it's relevant here, and then have, at the time of second reading, have that information to see if we've done that elsewhere in the city. Placing hours of operation to maybe not allowing the applicant here to be able to get financing, because that was one of the concerns of the minutes, I know. But we could do that.
Prior to the next reading, would there be any notification to neighbors?
Not unless you direct us.
Okay, 'cause
I think there should be
I'll be honest, my
notification.
only anxiety about this is, this is an item that gets pulled off the consent.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody in the community knows this is happening, and suddenly, without any sort of notification to a neighbor, we're opening a 24-hour woodworking shop next to their house. I have a little bit of anxiety about that.
Hold on a second. Hold
So
on a second.
my preference would be that, if that's the direction we go tonight, that prior to the next reading, there be some level of notification so that if neighbors are opposed to that, they have an opportunity to make public comment.
Well, if the majority of the commission has that concern, we can, concur with Planning Commission's recommendation with having that notification to go back out, that we're considering on the second reading, the extended hours of operation, but, explain what those are. And I think that might be an easier way to do it.
Would that be your recommendation as the simplest way to do it?
I think I lost the train of thought.
No, just,
Sorry.
no, being able to concur with the Planning Commission tonight, their recommendation, which would include the hours of 11 to or I'm sorry,
7 to
from
9.
7 to 9. But, you know, with the notification going out that we are considering extending those hours to whatever they may be on second reading.
We can. You know, we've provided with you the processes the code provides for you. One of them is to return it to the Planning Commission for further consideration, where we get a little bit fuller hearing and a little bit more public input to it, if that's a concern of the commission. Otherwise, even to approve it with revised conditions takes 4 out of 5 votes of the commission. So we would want some maybe indication that there are 4 votes to alter the hours on that second reading. At that time, if there aren't, you could send it back or do something otherwise as well. But, so those are your options today. We can bring
I
it.
guess that's where I'm coming from, is that if the neighbors don't have any issue with this, I don't know why we would have an issue with it. But I do want to make sure that we actually make some effort in the process to confirm that that's actually the case.
Yeah, the question I had was, the applicant had talked about having the machine shut down at 9 but stay open till 10. Is that kind of difficult to write that into a?
No, I think it's a condition we can write up. The enforcement of it, you know, I see some gray area in the enforcement of that. Does a drill press count as a loud machine or not? But if we write it up in such a way that, I mean, the idea is to give the protections to the adjacent residential uses, because this is setting off as a residentially zoned site today in sort of a sea of residential uses there. And so that special use permit gives you some protections in that situation, so. But you do have a lot of options on this one.
Let's hear back from the applicant. Come on up and,
So I have 3 things, maybe. Because of the nature of the construction of the building, the only neighbor that can actually hear what's going on inside is the neighbor across the street directly at 347 Elm. And it's my understanding that they provided written feedback to the Planning Commission about the fact that they're actually concerned about noise if it's anything other than a woodworking shop. So if I were to change it, which would actually trigger a whole new special use permit process, to my understanding. I have actually talked to them in between every part, which I know you're not necessarily going to take my word on that, but I think that they would be willing to come and speak for themselves at a future meeting if that's necessary. And in general, though, if the choice is to delay it by sending it back to the Planning Commission or accept the restrictions as they are, this process is at the end of 27 months of dealing with things that have been an emergency, and I would rather not have to make it longer just to get an extra hour of work time for somebody.
so it sounded like we could add language to the current SUP without having to go back through Planning Commission.
You can with 4 to 5 vote, and if you want to do courtesy notice on that second reading, we can provide that and bring it back at a date that we determine feasible for people to get the notice, prepare for the meeting, and we'll bring back the second reading of the ordinance.
Does that sound satisfactory?
I would be in favor of that.
As long as we're going through a notification
I
process,
just-
I mean, that would have to be, because I think it's a major piece of this.
It's, yeah, I mean, that's the whole holdup is.
Yeah.
Okay. So does someone want to make a motion?
Okay, what are we considering on those hours of
Restating.
operation?
Scott McCullough's.
Except you have to provide the hours of operation.
That's right. What are we considering on that? Because are we going to allow the machines have to be turned off at 9 but other business practice can go on? What are we
That's-
thinking here?
I guess that was what I was thinking it would be, is that the
Yeah,
machines
I don't
so
see a
much-
danger of having people in that building.
Yeah.
No, I don't either.
Yeah. But there can still be business uses within the building, just not heavy machinery, perhaps.
That'd be fine.
Machinery off at 9 and any other practice, whatever.
Till 10. That'd
So-
be fine.
We need a good motion, or do you think you might have enough direction
I have enough direction.
Okay,
What I've heard is machinery off by 9, and unlimited, no restriction on other use in the building that's not related to machinery audible off-site,
Yeah, I would,
Pending a courtesy notification.
with notice of the second reading.
okay.
I would make a motion then to concur with the Planning Commission's recommendation with the change as outlined by Scott, with the hours of operation, machinery off at 9, and other business practice allowed to go on throughout normal hours throughout the day, with the conditions, and to adopt on first reading ordinance number 9418.
Second.
Motion made by,
Also, I'm sorry, and also with notification to the neighbors.
so you still second?
Normal
Yeah.
notification practice.
Okay, so motion made by Commissioner Amix, second by Commissioner Herbert. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Margaretta. And so now we're on to number 16. Hold on a second, Dan. Let me flip back to that. So number 16 was to authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with BBC Research and Consulting for completion of a comprehensive housing market study in an amount not to exceed $78,650. Come on up, Dan.
I hope in the process of this study that the public will be able to provide some comment and to track the progress of the study. I tried to print out a rental license map. I could only print out half of the city on my Thomas Edison computer. But it's very clear that this city is overwhelmingly rental properties. And I live in a neighborhood that has to fight, literally, to keep some semblance of civility and sanity in the area, because there's so many rental properties and feral tenants and whatever. So I think this market study is important, and I think we as a public, particularly those of us who are probably a minority, we own the properties we live in, need to have some opportunity to track this and see what's going on, and then provide comment. My final comment, I'm wondering if $78,650 is going to be enough to be comprehensive, because this is very much needed.
Thank you, Dan. Scott, do you know what the public participation part will be like for this housing study?
Mayor, I'm happy to comment on that.
Oh, yes, please, Casey.
That's okay. Part of the housing study does include some stakeholder engagement. Also included is a telephone survey that the consultant will do to try to get the community's opinion on some of the matters that Mr. Dannenberg discussed. As far as tracking the process, AHAB, the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, will be continuing their monthly meetings and will be tracking the progress. At the conclusion of the housing study, which there's a timeline included in your packet, right now the expected completion date is sometime in late March or April. At that time, the consultant would come and make a presentation to the Affordable Housing Board, but also to you all, and of course the public would be invited to come and listen and provide feedback at that point.
Okay. Any other public comment on that item? Okay, back to the commission. Any thoughts? Or we can have a motion?
Move to authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with BBC Research and Consulting for completion of a comprehensive housing market study at an amount not to exceed $78,650.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Herbert, seconded by Vice Mayor Boley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, so that's it for consent. Now we're on to general public comment. Addressing the commission, the public is allowed to speak to any items or issues that are not scheduled on the agenda after first being recognized by the mayor. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes for public comment. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss, debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer the items to staff for follow-up if necessary. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments, questions to the commission. So this is for items that are not already on the agenda. Does anyone have general public comment? Come on up and sign in and tell us what you think.
Hi, my name is Karen Pagel Miners. I'm a resident of Lawrence. My address is 2906 Stratford Court.
Okay.
I would like to bring to the Commission's attention the applications for permits to authorize saltwater injection permits for saltwater injection wells in Douglas County. I'm referencing the public notices in the Lawrence Journal-World on November 9th, 2017. It's pages 5 and 6 of Section C. The wells are on leases about 6 or 7 miles from Lawrence, sort of southwest, or southeast rather, of the town of Eudora. I'd like to note that the term saltwater injection sounds more benign than it is because wastewater can contain fracking fluids, radioactive and cancer-causing substances. So obviously I'm concerned about water contamination from these wells. In addition, the injection wells in general have been proven to be unsafe. They can leak, the toxic chemicals can bubble up to the surface, or it can seep into, the toxic chemicals can seep into the groundwater. The oversight is not always very effective at all. In addition to being concerned about potential water contamination, there is the concern that the pressure from injection wells will increase our risk for experiencing earthquakes or so-called frac quakes. And thirdly, the Kansas Corporation Commission, to whom these applications go, has only allowed a very short comment period, 15 days. So from the October 9th publication, that would give us until, that would give us 1 more week until Tuesday. So time is of the essence. That's very frustrating because it feels like the process has little transparency and feels very rushed to get these wells through. There is not really anything holding drilling companies responsible for any damages they might cause or any contamination that they may cause, and that would then leave Lawrence and area towns with the bill for cleanup of whatever sort.
Okay.
As a native North Dakotan, I can attest to the fact that if there's a mess, drilling companies go bankrupt like that and disappear into nothing.
Karen, your time is up, but I wanted to ask you, was there a certain action that you were wanting from the commission?
Yes, sorry. I would like to, with the idea that it's easier to prevent a mess than clean up a mess, I would like to prevail upon the commission to consider filing an objection to these wells with the Kansas Corporation Commission.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you have any thoughts about this, Mr. City Manager?
Well, it's in the jurisdiction of the county, not our jurisdiction. Contamination is an issue, though, that we should be concerned about as well. I think the one thing we share is our Planning and Development Services Department. So maybe we can extract a joint letter of concern from both the city and the county that way.
Okay,
All right?
so you'll look into that.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other, thank you, Karen, for bringing
Okay.
that to our attention.
And also, the last day, if it's 15 days, is next Tuesday.
Okay.
So there's not very much time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other general public comment for items not on the agenda?
Hello, my name is Steve Ozark,
And I'm Dennis Constance.
and we're both members of the Affordable Housing Steering Committee for Justice Matters. There's an expression that a lot of us have heard: when you find yourself in a hole, the first thing you should do is stop digging. Lawrence is in a hole when it comes to affordable housing, and we've been digging for decades. In 1993, our city leaders called for the first affordable housing study. The city commissioned a second study in 2005. Both times, we came to the same conclusion. Our city has a serious problem with about 4,000 affordable homes needed, and we need a dedicated source of revenue placed in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to address that shortage. Thanks to the city leadership, the exact question will be decided by the public beginning tomorrow. If the people of Lawrence vote yes, funding would begin in April of 2019 and continue for 10 years. That would give us 17 months to study the problem before the funding comes to us. So again, to be clear, we already know a great deal about the scope of the problem. The proposed study is not to confirm that for a third time, but to simply provide current data to help us prioritize which projects should go first. How do we know there's a problem? Let's look at the numbers. Habitat this year has 20 applications for families requesting assistance with home ownership. They can serve 3. Last year, Family Promise received requests from 419 families. They can serve 20. Tenants to Homeowners has 78 people on their waiting list. The Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority currently has a waiting list of 403 individuals and families. Those people will wait 1.5 to 2 years before their opportunity to be served. All told, that's 920 requests for help, and those only represent what comes from people who meet those eligibility requirements and those willing to persevere for what is currently available. Justice Matters and this community has heard these stories year after year. We've heard stories of women returning to their abusers because they can't afford to go out on their own, from people living in their cars in their employers' parking lots because they can't afford a better arrangement, from teachers describing homeless children in their classrooms crying out for attention as a way to process the stress of their unstable housing situations. But that's not all. I have 2 young women with me today, and I'd like you to hear their stories straight from them.
Thank you, Steve.
Hi, my name is Jamie Corby. I am currently living in a temp house through Family Promise. The reason I am where I am is because back in February, my son and I were evicted from our home. Due to the expensive rent, we were forced from our home and spent a month living in a hotel. When the little bit of money I had left ran out, we went somewhere else, which was not ideal situation for either of us. As a mother, I became hopeless. And then I learned about Family Promise. Not only does Family Promise give us shelter in our time of greatest need, but they helped us link up with different organizations that can help people locate affordable housing. I know that if we didn't have the resources provided by Family Promise, we would today be living in a shelter. Family Promise has saved my life. Passing the affordable housing vote will not only help me, but others in similar vulnerable situations.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Hi, my name is, I'm sorry, can you hear me? Hi, my name is Zaria. I turned 17 next Tuesday. Affordable housing has impacted my life a lot. Last year around this time, I was homeless on my 16th birthday through Christmas. And during this time, I kind of gave up on life. Because at school, everyone was able to go home. And I didn't have a home to go to. And so I felt like there was no point in doing homework and stuff like that. But now that we are actually in an affordable house with Family Promise, I'm able to focus on school and stay on top of my homework. And I'm more grateful about what I have now that I took for granted before. I'm now a junior in high school on top of my grades, planning to go to a HBCU for nursing. So I guess you can say affordable housing has impacted my life.
Thank you. We have Kleenex right here too. Thank you, Steve.
Dennis Constance again. I want to say thank you to Jamie and Zaria for being willing to come and share their stories. Let me see if I can clarify just a little bit what you heard. You heard testimonies representing the world as it is and the world as it should be. Jamie told us what it's like for hundreds of people in this community. It's depressing and it's just plain hard. In fact, Dan Partridge in the health department says, and I quote, "It's health threatening." He says, "We have so many people spending more than half their income on housing when so many of your resources go into just that basic need of a roof over your head. It does not leave a lot left over for other things that are important, such as healthy food, good physical activity, and other factors of health." You also heard from a girl who was homeless 18 months ago. Now, with the stability that comes with having a place to call home, a home built using the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, she is preparing to graduate high school and go on to college. That story wouldn't be possible if this city didn't invest $100,000 into our trust fund. In the world as it should be, people like Zaria and her family are living proof that if we follow the model we created when we built Zaria's house, we can turn despair into hope. As Steve mentioned before, we've been in a hole in this town, and we need to stop digging and start addressing it. We thank you as community leaders for having the courage and leadership to place this on the ballot. We have thereby, with your help, put the pieces in place to make this work, except for the funding. May we as a community have the compassion and generosity to vote yes. It is literally a life-saving vote. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dennis. So advanced voting starts tomorrow, you said?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, okay. Thank you. Any other general public comment for items not on the agenda?
Hello, I'm Janine Cardine, and I live at 2807 Ridge Court. I brought forward a concern about businesses and them not following the no smoking regulations that are state law. And I was kind of grateful that I had been in the middle of a move, but I received a letter from the fire marshal of the city. And I wish I had it with me to read aloud, but he did say that they were going to get some education to the businesses to follow the state laws. And that would mean it is 10 feet away from the doors. It also means openable windows. And even having it clear, that kind of non-smoking sign that we can all understand. So I was really grateful to hear that this education was going to go on. So what I'm asking is, I'm still walking downtown and other places. I see mostly the same behavior going on, that people are smoking right on top of the doorways, you know. And I'm hoping that someone will take the time to care to politely enforce the state law, which is, you know, you're not to be smoking right on top of these openable doors. And also, they're very openable windows. So I was grateful to get the letter, and the education's going to get started, but I'm hoping as police officers might be walking around a little more and doing community policing. I don't mean fine these people, I just mean say you're breaking the state law on smoking and you shouldn't be smoking right on top of this front door.
Thank you, Janine.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. It's Ted Boyle from North Lawrence Improvement again. And what I want to do is give you an update on that storm that we had Saturday evening between 4 and 5 o'clock. And I want to tell you what, that storm hasn't been talked about. The Journal World has made 3 attempts to describe that storm. You know, and the weather station out at the airport, it's malfunctioning, has been malfunctioning. So whoever is in charge of that weather station needs to get it in order. But you know, this microburst, and they say, no, it wasn't a microburst, it was straight line winds. Well, now they say it was a microburst, a rain microburst. And you know, in North Lawrence, we've got several residents that have their own little weather stations. Wind speed and rain and everything, and the wind has been clocked Saturday evening between 70 and 80 mile an hour, and the winds, the rain was just perfectly horizontal, and between the wind and the rain uprooted a lot of trees in North Lawrence. We've probably lost, oh man, I can't remember when we lost so many trees and had so much property damage. We've lost a couple houses, you know, and you talk about affordable housing. You know, North Lawrence is a low mod neighborhood and 75% of the homes are owner occupied. So remember that. And we've had a tremendous amount of property damage. And I will say this, that after the storm, immediately after the storm, I went out and drove around North Lawrence, and I want to tell you, there wasn't a street in North Lawrence that was totally passable. You had to jigsaw around North Lawrence to get through North Lawrence. And I want to tell you, the neighbors immediately, the residents came out and started removing the debris from the streets, and also checking on the homebound and the elderly. And then I want to tell you, the city showed up, and again, I want to thank the city Public Works coming over after the storm that night and starting to clear the streets. And then the next day, around 7 o'clock, while I was removing the trees off my house, I got on a Facebook page, and they had a bunch of volunteers, and they said, you need help? And I said, yeah. And 10 minutes, 5 people were there. And so then we put the debris out by the street, and here come the city with the big grappling hook and removed it.
Thanks,
so,
Ted.
Yeah.
Were you going to bring up the pump under
Well,
the underpass?
I'm getting to the pump.
Okay, because we can just have Chuck answer your question now.
Well, I know the question. I already know the answer.
Okay.
I know the answer.
We advised him earlier.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know.
We're
I know.
report and understaffed
Yeah.
reports on the
Yeah.
one as well.
You know,
Okay.
I've been there, done that.
Thank you,
For the
Ted.
last 22 years. But the deal is, here's the problem, the safety problem. There was no injuries from the storm, and there hadn't been any cleanup. But the underpass flooded, and it was because Westar shutting the electricity off on the primary and the secondary lines coming into North Lawrence. When that happened, then you have to route the traffic across the UP tracks. And then the cars are parked on the UP tracks. And there was nobody at 2nd and Locust to direct traffic and just have them flow right on up North 2nd Street across the bridge. The stoplight was still working, people were stopping. These traffic was backed all the way up damn near to the turnpike. And then the cars parked on the railroad, traffic
Okay.
parked on the railroad.
Thank you, Ted. We appreciate it. We'll have Chuck
I can tell
actually
you really
deal
care
with this.
about North Lawrence.
No, I do. It's just your time is up, and and I already know Chuck is working on your issues, so we're so far ahead that.
Thank you for your criticism.
Thank you, Ted. Any other general public comment?
Dan Dannenberg, 2702 University Drive. On the issue of affordable housing and the housing market survey, I think there's some nexus there. And in my pinched, not too bright little world, I'm aware of 6 rental properties that have been vacant for quite some time. And one of them is on my street, and it has been vacant for years. It has not been occupied. And there are others around too, and it's just frustrating to hear that we don't have enough affordable housing and then see all these properties that are vacant. So I think we need to focus the housing survey and the affordable housing. Those two things, I hope, can be brought together in some way.
Thank you, Dan. All right, any other public comment for items not on the agenda? The housing survey was on the agenda. Just being nice, Dan. Any other items? All right, so let's move on to our regular agenda. So first up, addressing the commission. The public is allowed to speak to any regular agenda item or give public comment after first being recognized by the mayor. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes for public comment. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments, questions to the commission. So first up on our agenda, we're going to receive a presentation from Robert Benecke, the Criminal Justice Coordinator with the Douglas County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, of which I am also a member. Very exciting stuff that we've been doing.
Yes, it is. So good evening. I'm Robert Benecke, Criminal Justice Coordinator, Douglas County. I came from Johnson County. Terrible. So I appreciate the work that Mayor Soden and also Commissioner Larson's been working with us on the council. And this is what the council's made up of. You can see key stakeholders in the criminal justice system. Your municipal judge is on there. We just recently elected a new chair and vice chair. Pam Wheaton's here as well.
Pam is the new chair, right?
Mm-hmm. And so because I haven't talked to you guys before, I wanted to just go over a little bit what the purpose was when this commission or council was created last spring. And basically it's a platform for key stakeholders to come together, talk about criminal justice issues in the community, and make recommendations as needed. So that's basically the purpose of the council. These are their goals and the bylaws, 6 of them. And number one, there's one we've been working on quite a bit over the last year. But basically, it deals with jail expansion and mental health services in the community. Mental health services, recently there was a behavioral health project manager hired who's been working diligently with the hospital, Bert Nash, and the other stakeholders to look at mental health in the community. Number 2, data collection, always an issue, always trying to get better data. 3, processes affecting jail population, and I'll talk a little bit about what we've done over the last year to work towards that goal. 4, high representation of persons of color in the criminal justice system. So we're a couple different committees are working on that in 2 different ways. And then 5, recommendations to help control costs of managing offenders, and then 6, evaluate crime prevention programs. So the CJCC came up with, in a retreat when they first started, they came up with goals to work out throughout the year. So 3 subcommittees were made up, one specifically talking about alternatives to incarceration to reduce jail population. So a program that we started back in the spring, a pretrial monitoring program. And basically this is a program for defendants to get them out and be supervised in the community instead of being in jail. For typically, we screen for public safety and flight risk. So we have, and I'll get into specifics of that program here in a little bit, but it's under the direction of Pam Weegen today, and it's doing pretty good. Behavioral Health Court, it started this past January. The county commission funded it, and it's also under Pam, and I'll get into that a little bit more, and a house arrest program that I'll talk about. Judicial processes and practices. Right now, we have a consultant working in the courts, the district courts, studying processes and the flow of cases through the system to give us a report on what's going on and what, maybe some recommendations of what could be done better. And the reason that's important is, we've looked back since in the last 16 years, the Douglas County Jail has pretty much, the bookings have remained pretty flat, like 5,000, 6,000 a year. However, the length of stay has just increased. So the jail has a capacity of 186 people. Today it's probably sitting at 230, 235, which is the average daily population for the year. And for the last few years, at least since 2015, that ADP has continued to rise. That length of stay has continued to rise. So we're looking forward to that report. He has a deadline at the end of next month to get that back to us. The inmate population analysis forecast is complete. What we learned is that the population is going to continue to rise as our population in the county continues to increase. The population of the jail is going to increase right along with it. Crisis center development. You all know that there was a design out there that we were looking at, but it's still being looked at. But again, with Bob Tryansky, the behavioral health projects manager, we're tying in services as well into that study. Co-responder program, the city has funded that and is up and running. And then 3 groups I talked about. The disproportionate minority contact. One subgroup of the council is looking at just the jail and what that looks like, and the other is looking at the entire criminal justice system in the city, county. And along with that, recently interviewed a consultant to possibly come in and do a study. So maybe more to come on that as we need resources to fund that. And then data. The sheriff's office hired a data analyst, and she has been slowly learning the systems over the last year and finding ways that we can be fed data, or you can be fed data, or whoever needs that data, the stakeholder, that it's simple and it's combined, and we all get the same information.
Yeah, because right now we have like 3 systems that aren't exactly interchangeable.
Right.
easily.
Well, the system that the police and the sheriff's office uses is at Spillman, and so does the jail. But then there's a full court that the district court uses, and yeah, there's a few different systems that don't talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Canned systems, software, but yeah, so we're trying to get better with that.
And so when it comes to getting better data with our police contacts and stuff, that's something that we've been working on that may require an additional software module, I think was the last that we heard about it.
Potentially, yeah.
So it's been hard to understand the data when you don't have the best data. It's like a catch-22 almost.
And they're very, they're expensive systems. They're expensive systems to make changes in. They're proprietary. You have to go to the company for a simple form change. It's going to cost money. So we're just looking at workarounds and what we have today. I know that the police department, the Lawrence Police Department, I think it's just only been on this system for the last couple years, as with the Sheriff's Patrol, although the jail has been on it for maybe 8 years on Spillman. So it's a pretty new program to have on board and to try to gather stats out of it. I know we're getting better at it, so we're getting better.
Yeah, and also we've been having a lot of conversation about when does a police officer start to document an interaction. It's not just car stops or when you stop to talk to people, or so it's incredibly complex.
Sure. And that's, this, thank you, this group that's working on disproportionate minority contact, specifically in the criminal justice system, and this consultant we're talking about is they've done studies in other jurisdictions that are, maybe a year to 2 years it would take to do, would involve the community and involve all the players, and we might get a better picture of what that disproportionate minority contact is, and then be able to address it if in fact it is disproportionate. So.
Yeah, because the jail numbers are definitely disproportionate, but criminal justice is a giant system, so.
Yes, so
trying to pick out the points.
The jail, Douglas County's African American population is 4%. The jail's population is 19-20%. So, and that's
Right.
what we're taking a look at.
Yeah, and all of the different groups have been trying to figure out, is it because people can't bond out? Is it because perhaps their sentence is longer, or their pretrial waiting period in jail is longer? It's not easy to say because we have disproportionate amount in the jail. It's because we have disproportionate contact on the street. So it's just an enormous system. I mean, that's why it's taken so long just to get to this point. And so then it comes back to data again.
It does.
Robert, can you speak to a little bit about why the length of stay is occurring?
So we're waiting for the study that Dr. Beck's doing. And, back in 2015, legislation changed a speedy trial from 90 to 150 days. At the same time, they reduced indigent defense attorney salary, hourly salary. So could that be a correlation to this increase in 2015 when we start to see it? Maybe. There could be other things as well. So I don't really want to speculate what may or may not be going in the courts until we see that study. So.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. And this predictive analysis project with Johnson County, obviously I have a pretty good relationship with Johnson County, as I worked there for a long time, and their criminal justice coordinator. And although we're not specifically getting into predictive analysis, they're pretty far along with it. We are going to come on board with a program they created called My Resource Connection, which will bring data from all the different stakeholders in Douglas County together in one place, in a public version and also in a non-public version. And so what it can do for us, I mean, one example would be, somebody that's a user, a multiple user, using up system resources, and they're in the hospital, they're in Burt Nash, they're at community health, public health, or they're the police contact, and so it can kind of tie those contacts together and maybe be more proactive in an approach to treating or helping those people.
Yeah, because there's privacy regulations that regulate the amount of information and the types that different entities can share, so that's also been kind of an obstacle to having a better cohesive reaction, especially to multiple people that use the system a lot more than the average person.
And those high utilizers are eating up a lot of the resources.
Right.
So if we can address that, if that's just one way that this database will help us. So I talked about pretrial release. These numbers are numbers that I reported out to the CJCC and the County Board of Commissioners last few weeks ago, and so look there at the left. It's a fluid number. So we've served today. We've served 142. But you can imagine people that are coming into the pretrial program, they may be there for a short period of time. They may be there for a longer period of time. They may be revoked for a drug screen or another crime they may commit. So it's a fluid number. And I take you over to the fourth column, jail bed saved, as an example of what we've done is just every day that somebody's on a pretrial status being supervised is one less day they're in jail. So when I did this, ran these numbers, that we were looking at 9,300 bed days saved.
And how many dollars did you potentially equate that to?
Yeah.
Average?
Let's talk about failures. Yeah, so I did an example there when I reported out, and with those 57 days, if you're charging, I call it an example because this $80 is what the daily rate for the county jail is today. So as we farm or we house inmates in other jails, the 4 other counties we house them in, the cost may be a little different. It may be $50 in a smaller county. It may be $70 in a bigger county. So anyway, there's an example of what potential savings, by having this pretrial monitoring program. We did just hire another staff that we hope to increase that caseload. Caseload's been around 45, 50, 52 today is what it's at. And hopefully when this other guy's up and trained that we can increase that by another 30 or so.
And that's a new program. That's why the graduation rate is so low so far.
Yeah, well, we've been doing pretty good. I tell you, one thing about that program is that the best practices example is that we are screening at the jail and every day, so people, can go to their first appearance and then have the potential to be put on pretrial release. So we're getting closer to that. It's been mostly a staff, not enough staff to do that, and we've actually done a workaround to get by it with a different kind of form. So we hope to see those numbers increase fairly soon for pretrial. And then the most important thing right now is that we're not charging defendants, and that's a very innovative approach. You won't see that very, very often across the country. My conversations with the county administrator and the county commissioners, as long as we're housing out of county for $1 million a year, that we might be doing pretrial at, if they're using monitoring equipment, it may be $5 to $10 a day, and then one important thing to know is that everybody on pretrial monitoring is definitely not on an electronic device. So we probably have, of the 52 we have on monitoring today, maybe 12 to 15 are actually using electronic monitoring. Behavioral health court is, I think, Mayor, what you were referring to about graduation.
Yeah, thank you.
So thing about behavioral health court is if the crime is directly related to the mental illness, it's one of the key requirements to get in the program. So the district attorney's office screens recommendations. These recommendations come from defense attorneys, they come from judges, they come from prosecuting attorneys, they come from mental health workers, but so you can see that, looking at that slide right there, that there's been, 55 here a few weeks ago that were referred to the program totally this year, and we've served 15 people. Today there's 12 sitting in the program. Again, that program can be fluid as well. A couple of them are at Osawatomie right now that were in the program. And it's a program that's probably going to take about a year to get through. So the female that's going to graduate, we've had one graduation, a male. The female that's going to graduate next month, she'll probably finish it in about 9-10 months.
So just to clarify, because that graph can be pretty confusing to someone who looks at it out of context, that does not mean that 1 out of 15 ever completed. That indicates that of the 15 served, several are still in the process of?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, they're still.
It's not just from a,
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
outsider looking in, you look at that and you think, that's terrible, 1 out of
Right.
15, that's
No.
horrible. But, okay.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
For
to clarify.
And the timeline for each individual varies depending on
Mhm.
what, the offense might have been.
Right, and the
so-
programming they need, and there's a team that works together, through the courts, through Burt Nash, and through the district attorney's office. So that team meets. The thing about these offenders that are in the behavioral health court, they go to court every week. Every Thursday they got to report to court, and they got to talk to the judge and get an update on their progress and their program and their. So it's intensive. It's an intensive program. I talked about that. So house arrest. So I just found out today that we're going online Friday. So I'm pretty happy about that. It was approved back in May. We got staff on board here in July. I mean, we brought together a group of stakeholders that included city, municipal court as well, and came up with a program that we like. And we've been collaborating with Judge Miller and his staff on how that would affect city court. And because we don't have the data that we keep talking about, what the judges and we've decided to do is that when he sees that need or he wants to put somebody in our house arrest program, we'll do it like on a scholarship. So the county will pay that cost as we study it, 6 months to a year out and see how much is being used by the city, and then maybe we'll talk about additional resources down the road.
It'll be interesting to see how many bed days that saves us for
Right.
jail, having house arrest.
So I think you guys use about 6,000 jail bed days a year, and man, if you could save a third of that, it could be significant. Yeah, so we started up on Friday. And a couple other things that the council has been engaged in is the Stepping Up Initiative, and that's a national initiative to reduce the number of people with mental illness in jail. So we did a resolution to become part of that national initiative, and we've taken steps in different ways to address the mentally ill in the jail. The second one is Data-Driven Justice Initiative, and it addresses serious mental illness, high utilizers cycling through the system. And so we've, as well as a pretrial release program, which we're doing. So, and then third, we participate, SAMHSA has recognized us for our mental health screening at our jail. So we went to Washington, D.C. this summer and did a Best Practices Academy as facilitators. And then we just recently were invited to a Data-Driven Justice Behavioral Design Institute, which police department was involved with different stakeholders in the community. So, there's been a lot of progress in the last year, and a lot more to come. And so I'm pretty positive about what the council's doing. So,
Yeah.
Any questions about
Any
anything?
questions?
Wow.
Yeah, it's
There's a lot
amazing
going
how
on.
much.
Yeah. We're getting some things done.
And it's so complicated. A lot of it's county side, but we're starting to be able, of course, we're waiting for the new chief to come on to work with him, and so that kind of put a delay in some of the city initiatives that we were working on.
It
so,
did.
yeah.
So I'm actually meeting with him on Thursday for the first time, and hopefully we'll make progress, continue the progress that we've been working towards.
Yeah,
So,
excellent.
I've been sitting on the data group, and that has been really fascinating, and it's exciting to have our national expert that's helping us, formulate some of those data questions and comprehensive look at how we ask questions and what questions we ask. I think it's great.
yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Pam or Judge, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Sorry.
Just one thing. Municipal court already uses house arrest. We use about 6,000 days a year of house arrest currently. So I don't want Robert's comments to be interpreted as if we're not doing that currently. Right now it's being done through private providers. The idea of the county's house arrest program would be that we would use that for the people who cannot afford house arrest through private providers. Right now, I think the qualification guideline would be about 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. So that's adjustable. Right now, they're not charging us anything for those days, and I intend to use it. As a matter of fact, I already ordered someone into house arrest on Friday, so we'll see how it goes.
And you have, for the behavioral court, you already have someone that's there in the court to help kind of look for people that might need some extra help. I'm trying to remember who
So right now we're partnered up with the KU School of Social Welfare, and we have 3 interns that work 4 days a week. They're master's level social work students about to graduate and go into practice, so they're in their 2nd year. And they staff at the court and are available for people who have mental health issues or substance abuse issues they want to talk to someone about. A little bit of case management service at the front end. They're sponsored currently. The supervisors are through DECA and Burt Nash, so they're partners as well with us.
Excellent. Any other new initiatives on the municipal court level?
I don't know what's new. No, I think we're just trying to perfect what we have currently. Those interns are doing life skills classes, and I'm trying to pay community service hours versus fines and fees for people who attend life skills classes, because a lot of times the criticism of courts is that we're just after money. And actually, I think anyone who spent any time at all in the court system realizes that we're after trying to improve people's lives. And so what we're trying to do in this circumstance is to encourage people who may not have any other way to discharge their obligation to the court to come in, maybe gain something, benefit from the involvement with life skills classes, gain some skills potentially, and also work off their debt to the court. So we'll see how that goes. Right now they're not particularly well attended, but we're still trying to get the word out.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Pam, did you have anything that you wanted to say as chair of the council? Okay. Any other questions? The chief, do you have anything you want to say, chief?
No, just happy to be here.
Excellent. We have the mental health crisis team. I think it'd be good just to, if anyone has a short definition of what we just put into a few months ago. I'm not the right person to talk about it. Is it Amber that's running that program?
The co-responder program.
Will you just talk about that very briefly, just so, because there are lots of initiatives that we're working on.
Yeah, so the mental health co-responder program that I believe you have a supervisor and 2 officers now, Amber and another officer, and then Susan Hadel is the mental health provider that is part of that responder program. And I don't feel like I'm qualified to talk for the police department on the program, but from what I understand is they're making an impact in the community. So
excellent.
All
Thank
right.
you for describing that for me.
You bet.
I'm not involved enough with it to speak knowledgeably about it. Please come on up. Yeah.
So I think with April we started. We do have 2 officers dedicated to the program, a co-responder and Susan Hadel. We are in the infant stages of gathering information, but we have found in this time that they have been a valuable resource in helping us with the long process of getting folks into the help that they need. These 2 officers and the co-responder free up our patrol officers' resources, get them back on the street, and help kind of guide this process through the hospital system into the mental health system. So
excellent.
It has been a benefit thus far.
Excellent. Thank you.
You bet.
Those are all the ones I can think of. Lisa, am I missing any that we've been working on? It's just amazing amount of work. Okay, any public comment on this item?
I'm Jennifer Ananda, 1951 Miller Drive. I just wanted to say thank you all for this work. I know that criminal justice reform is difficult, and it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of people coming together into the same room who are used to being kings of their courts, sometimes literally. And it takes a lot of humility for everybody to come together and say, how can we do this better? And so I'm really proud of our community for being willing to do that. I have done criminal justice reform work, and so I know firsthand how difficult it can be and how many gaps there are, and how siloed these pieces of the criminal legal system can be. And acknowledging that we have to be intersectional in the way that we're dealing with this to address issues such as poverty, housing issues, access to housing, affordable housing, trauma, and being trauma-informed in our response through our law enforcement as well as in the courtrooms, to address self-medication and the effect that that has and the crimes that are committed as a result of that, and mental health issues and how they affect not only the access that individuals have in the broader community to resources, but also the likelihood that they're more likely to be involved in our criminal legal system. And so I just wanted to say thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you all for the work that you're doing on this really important issue, and it's one that's very important to me, so I'm glad to see it happening. Thank you.
Yeah, next time we have a vacancy, we need to add her to our council. If you get elected, maybe you'll take my seat on there.
I'm Janine Cardine again, and I just wanted to comment because the last city I spent time in, Appleton, Wisconsin, I spent 9 years up there, and they had pretty well developed their community policing to the point where there was a pretty separate set of police that would show up, especially at a situation like a suicide or a real violent situation. And I felt like I was lucky, but it wasn't an interesting time that I was at positions in Appleton, Wisconsin, where people were shooting themselves or jumping off a bridge and things like that. And I was very impressed with the mobile units that came forward and how trained these separate community officers were in de-escalating that suicide. And I just want to comment that when we make comments like, well, we've provided a life skills class and therefore we've done something to make it easy for some of these people, just like our former person just said, a lot of these people have had a lifetime of insults and poverty, and the life skill class is kind of a slap in the face when you don't have housing, when you've had severe and persistent mental illness, when you've been abused as a child. So I just wanted to say that I think there is room for improvement. I walk around this city a lot. I think our police could be more approachable as people. I see them at Hy-Vee, and they don't come off friendly. They don't come off easy to approach. So I'm really grateful for the new police chief. I hope that he can help that improve, that they can be out walking around and they can come up a little less covered with weapons and a little more present so that we can talk to them and they can talk to people in trouble. We just don't perceive them as kind of busy people with weapons on them.
Thank you, Janine. Any other public comment on this item? Of course, we have the crisis training that everyone's supposed to have completed by now. And then in your city manager's report, Tom, you have the grant for police cameras.
I'll report out.
Yeah, so lots of good stuff going around. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? That was scheduled just because I thought it might be good to have Robert give us an update on all of the programs, because as you've seen now, they're so complicated, I can't possibly report out as the city commission representative on that council. So thank you for coming and talking to us tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're on to number 2. This was formally moved from consent agenda item number 14, authorize the acceptance of transportation alternative awarded funds for the 19th and Iowa pedestrian bicycle underpass in the amount of $1.6 million. So $2,000 from the city, local match with $200,000 from KU as well, and Safe Routes to School in the amount of $400,000 with the $100,000 local match from the city.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Dave Cronin, City Engineer in the Public Works Department. I put together a few slides here on some talking points for the TA application projects, and will be certainly willing to answer any questions. I know we've had a number of questions concerning the 19th and Iowa project, and hope to get some of those answered tonight as best as possible. Brief recap on the Transportation Alternatives Program. It's a federal funded program where dollars are allocated through the state, which goes through the Kansas Department of Transportation. Communities submit applications, and they select projects based off of a competitive scoring system. I believe there was $18 million in the program this last go around, and that's for 2 fiscal years. Brief timeline on the process so far. Back on May 8th, they did a call for projects. They had an informational meeting on May 15th to kind of discuss the application. Staff worked after that point to come up with some options for submitting applications. We met with the Transportation Commission at the study session on June the 8th, and then met here at the City Commission June the 20th, which was the last meeting before, the last regular scheduled public meeting before the applications were due on July the 7th. And I would say even after our meetings with the Transportation Commission and the City Commission June 20th, we were still looking at options and cost estimates and details to kind of strengthen the application and get more information as we put the application together. So the really exciting news is that on September the 28th, we were notified that we were selected on both of the 2 applications that we submitted. We submitted, again, one for 19th and Iowa underpass, and that was a $1.6 million, or a $2 million project, $1.6 million TA fund, $400,000 in local match. The program's an 80-20 split, and also our second application was a Safe Routes to School application to complete gaps in the network, the priority network for the Safe Routes to School, and that was a $500,000 total project, $400,000 TA and $100,000 local. Tonight we are looking just to get some approval to move forward with accepting the funds. We will still need to go through an agreement process with the state. We are going to need to get some more survey information to tie into the project that we're doing next summer between Naismith and Iowa on 19th Street, as we're going to be reconstructing that street. With that street project, we're putting a shared use path on the north side of 19th Street that we've partnered with KU on, and we are also including bike facilities on that street. So this project will tie into that project, and we would look to find some economies to do the construction concurrent with that project. Obviously, if we're working on an underpass on 19th Street while we have the pavement removed, it's a good time to look at doing that project. So I have a few more details here, and I've got some preliminary plans that I could show that kind of gives you more of a concept on the tunnel project. Real briefly on the scoring criteria, we recommended submitting this project because it best fit their scoring criteria. After the last round of TA projects that KDOT did, they came out with the scoring criteria that gave applicants a chance to see how projects scored, so that it wasn't subjective based off of how much cost share that you proposed for the project, that the project would be awarded based off of its merits. So for KDOT's criteria, some of the highlights for the scoring are that it's a transportation-related facility, and not just recreational, but provides a transportation goal, that it's in a local bicycle or pedestrian plan, that, you know, if it's along a street with a high-speed traffic, it scores higher. As you can see, the greater the speed limit, the higher the score. And if it creates a safer crossing for roadways, it also scores higher with the conflict factor. So with that in mind, and the ongoing plans to reconstruct 19th Street, this project seemed to fit their scoring criteria and be in the area of that ongoing or the upcoming project there at 19th Street. And then we also considered the Pedestrian and Bicycle Issues Task Force Bikeway Vision. This was a city task force that presented a report at the beginning of last year, and in that report they created a vision of the future bikeway network in Lawrence. And so there's a lot of lines and colors on this map, but the red, darker areas are greater demand, and that's a heat map based off of existing bicycle and pedestrian counts. This is also overlaid with our bikeway plan, and so the red lines are bike lanes on streets. The green lines are shared use paths. I'm not sure if I can zoom in on this slide, but whoops, we have an existing shared use path on the west side of Iowa Street. We're putting a shared use path on the north side of 19th Street, along with bike lanes. And so there's a lot of connectivity with existing and proposed bike infrastructure at the intersection of 19th and Iowa. I would also note that as part of the long-term network on this heat map, they created this kind of gray these gray shaded lines, which are the priority routes in long-term network. So you can see around Lawrence is what we're referring to as the Lawrence Loop. That is this gray line around, and then you can kind of see some of the spokes to that loop off of the outside the loop into the city center. So this crossing here is on that route. This is a future path through West Campus that would extend from Clinton Parkway to 19th and Iowa. I think it's part of what the KU Master Plan has identified as the Jayhawk Trail, but it also connects to the existing shared use path on Clinton Parkway that goes all the way out to Clinton Lake. So that's another reason why I think this project is in demand, and it kind of creates that link or that gap between bicycle facilities on either side of Iowa Street. I talked about the project cost a little for the 19th and Iowa project. Again, it was a $400,000 local match. Since we've got the news on the award, we've discussed with KU splitting the local match 50-50. They've agreed to contribute $200,000 of the $400,000 with the match for the project, and they've also agreed to donate the right-of-way that's required to accomplish the tunnel project. And I would say that there's certainly going to be a need to have a right-of-way to be able to tie in the tunnels to the existing bicycle network. Real basic information on where we're at with very preliminary designs or concepts of what this could be. We're looking at, I'm going to see if I can flip over to the Elmo here. Again, this is very preliminary. I will zoom out just a little. So you can see north is up, or kind of up, but Fire Station 5 there on the southeast corner would be the midpoint between the two tunnels. So we would have a tunnel on the east side of the intersection underneath 19th Street, and then one on the south leg underneath Iowa. The length of the tunnels would be pretty similar to the existing two tunnels that we have on the Lawrence Loop, the one that's under 6th and K10, and then we have one over at Bob Billings in K10 along the South Lawrence Traffic Way. Those are approximately 140 feet in length. The one under 19th Street, very preliminary, but it's 140 feet, and then the one underneath Iowa is about 200 feet. And just to give folks, again, an idea of what those existing tunnels look like, we've got a few pictures we put in the application. This is the tunnel at 6th and K10 that goes underneath 6th Street on the shared use path. I would say there are several other at-grade crossings for Rec Pass and Lawrence. These are some of the recently constructed crossings there at 31st and Iowa underneath the bridges that were done with the SLT project. And we also have an underpass on the Breaux Creek Rail Trail at 23rd and Haskell Indian Nations University area. So, you know, from a user standpoint, having a grade separated crossing is a huge safety benefit. You're not having conflicts with traffic, particularly turning traffic at intersections. So, you know, this is a tremendous opportunity for the city to create a safe crossing, connect two nodes of the network on either side of Iowa. Iowa's kind of a barrier to cross for some. It has a very high volume of traffic, and staff feels confident this is the best use of these funds to be able to match a significant grant from KDOT to complete this project. A couple other questions that have come up, and again, we do need to continue to work through design and public involvement and discussing with other staff departments, but the one is security in the tunnels, whether or not it's going to be lighted or if there's going to be cameras in there. That's something we definitely need to discuss. The other two tunnels that we have that I mentioned along the South Lawrence Traffic Way, they don't have lighting currently, but that's not to say that these shouldn't have lighting. I do think that having the two different tunnels, not one under 19th and one under Iowa, creates an opportunity to have more light in the tunnel, natural light, than having one that's catty corner, and that would be longer of a tunnel if it was catty corner. So I think, well, I don't think, but I know that we need to continue those discussions on safety, how this ties into the KU Central District project and that network there on that corner. We need to do some get some more survey information and work with KU to help facilitate right-of-way and how this ties into the 19th Street pass. So there's some details that we certainly need to work through. So I would mention that's one thing that we've gotten questions on. The second
Dave, I have
is
a question about that. Where the two tunnels meet at the fire station, so that's going to be a wide open area. It's not that it just kind of connects in a dark corner, basically. It's going to be outside.
correct. Yeah, it would daylight. Both tunnels would daylight there, and there would be an area that you would transition from one to the other.
So there's room there with all the parking that the fire station has back there?
There is room. We will need to reconstruct some of that retaining wall that's there.
Right.
You know, we'll get into all those details as we look through the design, but it should not impact the parking as far as where we're at in the conceptual stage. So again, we will need to look at rebuilding some of those walls over there. But this too, having the two tunnels, it gives an opportunity to, if you just need to cross one leg of the street, you know, it links KU, but it also links the high school down the street. So you're able to cross Iowa here at this great separated crossing and continue on 19th Street, whether you're going to KU or the high school or to downtown or wherever your destination may be. So
So the fire station, does it already have security cameras on their property or on the building?
don't know.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, again, this is just conceptual. There will be a need for some retaining walls, and we would work that out through the engineering phase. Identifying utilities, underground utilities is important too. Another question we've had is why not go above ground with a bridge? Bridges are great. It just depends on the grades. And here we're at the top of the hill for the intersection. So you come up 19th, you come up Iowa to get to this elevation. To then bridge over, you would need to start a bridge a long distance back, and it would be a very long bridge to be able to get up with ADA ramps and slopes at percentage to be able to then bridge over the street, which would need to be over 16 feet above the elevation of the road. And so, you know, you're looking at about 20 feet for where the crossing would be versus the grade of the road. And to get that distance, 20 feet, and the ramps that you would need, it would be an extremely long bridge, and it would be expensive. So I don't think there is no feasibility to a bridge structure here. That's not to mention there's overhead power lines along Iowa 19th as well that would further complicate that. So that is not an economical solution to a grade separated crossing at this location. Yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions. Again, I think we do get requests time to time to look at providing safer crossings, and the one that I remember recently was at Bob Billings and Bob White. A year and a half ago, the neighbors on the south side wanted to safely cross Bob Billings, so we looked at using the existing drainage structure underneath Bob Billings to try and see if we could work that out to be a rec path for a safer crossing, and ultimately weren't able to do that, so we ended up putting a traffic signal there at the intersection, and that, you know, that was a considerable cost. It was over $250,000 for that traffic signal. So not that the location isn't important. People cross there to get over the Victor Park Trail, but this is even a greater opportunity for the amount of bicycle and pedestrian users that use this facility. So.
Thank you, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Dave?
Yeah, the tunnels that you were showing on K10 under Bob Billings and whatever 6th Street, those aren't really underground tunnels, are they? They just go under the highway. Whereas this tunnel would actually go physically underground. Is that correct?
I mean, this is an underground tunnel. Mm-hmm. The road, yeah, it just depends on the way you look at it. You know, the road sits higher at 6th Street, and on either end of the approach to this tunnel, on the rec path, you're coming up the hill. You know, we gotta look through the details of this. There's not as much clearance between the bottom of the road and the top of the tunnel. On our tunnel concept on this 19th and Iowa project, we're going to have some utilities that we're going to have to work through, so it could be a deeper tunnel as compared to this one here at 6th and K10. So I think they're similar, but probably not identical.
So what's the width of those paths? You're looking at 12 feet for the one on Iowa.
Yeah.
What are those the same?
Yeah, these are the same. These are 12 feet wide by 10 feet high. And the length is similar to the...
But we can't install lighting throughout the ones on Iowa?
We can. I mean, that's an option. And I think that's something that we need to discuss. how we do that.
He was
In
saying
in
our
our very
current ones
preliminary
don't.
cost estimate, we included lighting, just to show it when we were kind of penciling this out on the numbers. But how much lighting to use and where to use it and all those details we would need to work through. And then how do you maintain it, et cetera. So, you know, there's a couple other pedestrian tunnels in Lawrence. One's at Pinckney, one's over by Broken Arrow. I know the Pinckney one has lights that were installed a few years ago. I'm sure that works well. I don't know about the Broken Arrow one, but yeah, it's certainly on the table, and I think it would be a good idea to have lighting if it's possible.
That's what I would be interested in seeing, yes.
Yeah, me too.
I think the biggest concern that I've heard voiced is that safety issue. You know, people hear underground tunnel and it seems like an unsafe space. From your knowledge, and I might direct this to the police department or Public Works or whoever wants to answer this, with all of the examples of tunnels we have throughout the community, do we have any history of these being an area where crime has occurred, attacks on people have occurred? Is there any history of that whatsoever?
Not in my 21 years. I'm sure mischief happens there, but nothing of a major occurrence.
You can see some graffiti right there, and we've had graffiti in the Pinckney Tunnel, but nothing like what you're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, let's go to public comment. Is there public comment on this item?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Travis Robinette. I live at 1402 West 22nd Street, and I'm here to speak in favor of accepting the grant to move forward with this project because it's a great opportunity to really improve the connectivity of the neighborhood. I feel like where I live in Schwegler is isolated from west of Iowa. I mean, I'm a confident bicyclist, and it's still always iffy for me to cross 21st Street. Sometimes a day you can't even do it. 23rd Street has a lot of businesses where cars are always turning in and out. 19th Street is really busy, especially when KU's getting out. There's turning traffic everywhere. And it's often a long wait at the intersection. So yeah, and then Irving Hill is a really steep incline. It would discourage, you know, beginner cyclists and kids from using it. It's not really helping Schwegler elementary students get to school at all from the west side of Iowa. And so I feel like that this gives a safe, car-free crossing. It's the busiest street in town, and it's an area that's going to get really busy the next 5 to 10 years as KU finishes the Central District and then starts building up on Schenck Field in the West District. So you're going to have a lot of students moving between there. There's going to be more cars crossing at 19th and Iowa, so I think this is a great opportunity to make a safer connection where people won't get hit by cars. And, you know, as Dave said, the design's still preliminary. There's a lot that we can change about it. I'm for lighting, I'm for cameras. If you have a well-lit tunnel that you can see out of both ends, it makes people a lot more confident wanting to actually go through there. And you look at a place like Boulder, they have a lot of underpasses, and they make it work. People are confident. This is a busy area, too, most of the time. Even in the evening, I think when KU gets out of class, there's going to be movement. And the busier an area it is, the more safe it tends to be, from what I understand. But, you know, safety, just from a public perception, is still a concern. And I think that we should, for transparency's sake, see a cost comparison between what a bridge would look like and what a tunnel would look like, so we can really actually see, well, how much money would we have to invest to make it a pedestrian bridge instead. And instead of making it super long, you could make spiraling staircases. So. But anyway, I would like to see a cost comparison. But, you know, it's still a really preliminary phase. It sounds like a great deal to me, so I'm for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. Any other public comment? Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so we'll bring it back to the commission. I think adding the lights and cameras, I'm certainly very interested in that.
Well, I think that's an absolute. I mean, anything that we can do to, you know, increase the natural light and that break in the middle that is open air, I think works. But, you know, lighting itself inside that tunnel, I think that we really, let's make sure that we include that as part of the design.
I really like the splitting it into two
Right,
separate legs. I think that's great. And I'd also like to express appreciation for KU's contribution to this too. It's great to see that. Thank you.
I think it's a great project, and I do like that they split it up, because I think the first one we saw, they were going from northeast to southwest, so it's really great that they've added the neighborhood access there. And the safety obviously will have to be addressed and should be addressed.
Yeah, the feedback I got, like I said, the only negatives I really heard dealt with the concerns over safety. So I think if we just go in from the beginning with a plan of action for that, and I think a lot of it is just that there's kind of a lack of knowledge that we've done things like this before. I think other than perhaps the Pinckney Tunnel, which I think is pretty well known about, a lot of our other examples of tunnels, I'm not entirely sure a lot of people are all that familiar with who aren't regular cyclists or users of the path. And so just kind of getting out that educational piece that, we've done this. This isn't brand new, and in 21 years of police experience, we can't cite an example of somebody getting into an unsafe situation as a result of such infrastructure. So that helps put my mind at ease.
Okay, does someone want to make the motion?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I would, let's see here. I would move to authorize the acceptance of transportation alternative awarded funds for the 19th and Iowa pedestrian bicycle underpass in the amount of $1.6 million with a $200,000 City of Lawrence local match and a $200,000 University of Kansas local match, and the Safe Routes to School project in the amount of $400,000 with a $100,000 local match.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Herbert, seconded by Commissioner Larson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right. So now we're on to commission items. Do commissioners have any items they wish to discuss?
Oh, I do. Scott, several weeks ago, when we had the item at KU where the bookstore was, we had talked about, during that, about the city code and talking about an update process. Are we continuing with that?
I think if you're speaking about the parking, that was part of
No, I'm
it.
talking about, the city code, the building codes.
Oh, yes, we've begun a formal review of the 2018 building ICC codes.
Okay. Did we not have a little bit of comment that night about maybe not doing that, every 3 years, but going to a 6-year kind of plan?
I made a statement, I think, that we have that under consideration after this code cycle. Sort of a regional discussion we're having right now with our counterparts in the region about that.
Okay. I think that we definitely ought to consider 6 years, and I'm not, I'm not going to be here to be able to discuss that one, but
Commissioner, you may recall we had that discussion, and then we brought back an agenda item gaining direction from the commission to start the process for the 2018 codes, and then bring that back to the commission later next year. And I think as part of that discussion, we can talk about going to a 6-year cycle versus a 3-year cycle.
I do think that there's some regional application, and even the builders probably would appreciate having the same codes in effect. So I think that discussion should go on, and if you do the 18, you're going to have plenty of time to think about that.
It's actually interesting that 2018 codes actually scale back some of the
issues.
energy requirements from the 2015.
And that's one of the issues when you go on such a short changeover, is they realize there's some concerns, so it's almost like a guinea pig type situation. They wind up changing, so everybody's already geared up, and 3 years later, they're having to possibly change.
And you always get into the debate about determining something for a future commission.
Right.
And so I would tell you that while that would be something that you may think today is desirable, you'd want to look at what the code applications are each time they come out, really to determine, if there's things that you'd still need to amend. You could maybe do more specific amendments, but instead of a whole code adoption. But I'd keep my alternatives open as we go forward.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, so we're on to the city manager's report.
Yeah, a couple things. We added a couple of items. The first one is the Lawrence Police Department has been notified it'll be a recipient of a Department of Justice grant to purchase body-worn cameras for police officers. The federal award is in the amount of $231,000, which is actually about half of the overall project implementation cost. And the department anticipates having the cameras in place by the end of 2018. So that was good news, because I think that was one of the issues that the city commission was interested in terms of relationship with the community.
So Tom, real quick, will that free up some of that money that was in the CIP, or is?
I'm trying to recall, I think we probably did budget for the
whole
full
thing.
amount, and that this grant will offset some of that.
Great.
So yeah, that will redound to the fund balance. Ted was trying to give the update that staff was, I think Leslie was trying to comment that staff was going to address. So at this point, I think, Chuck, were you going to give us a brief update, maybe, and talk about the backup power for the storm sewer system?
Apparently the railroad crossing, some issue there.
Really what I wanted to do is give kudos to our three departments, Parks and Rec, Public Works, and Utilities. They were out beginning right after the storm at 4 o'clock on Saturday. They were there till late. We actually did get the underpass pumped out. Utilities brought over a pump. We sucked it out and transferred it over to a storm sewer that emptied into the Kansas River. We are already working on, and had been, Monday we talked about it, about getting a plug-in so that we can plug a backup generator in there. But out of all the power that was out, utilities kept all the sanitary sewer pumps going. We got all the roads opened up that night, well, most of them. There were a couple larger trees, and then it got dark. We kept people in the area to make sure nobody drove through the underpass until it was cleared. By the time we actually physically pumped it out, the power did come back on. You know, over the whole time period that I've been here, and David Kraus has been here 27 years, those two feeds from Westar always have worked. We haven't had that need to have a third redundant source. So we are already working on that, so we will have that in about 4 weeks. But again, I really just wanted to say I appreciate all the hard work that really the staffs did. I received emails. I walked over to Tom's house a couple times, and you know, that was about it. And those guys worked hard. So kudos to Parks and Rec, Public Works, and Utilities.
And
you
I
can
think,
see all the pictures.
and I think that they did a lot of the heavy lifting and getting debris removed, opening things up. But I think it would be, we need to acknowledge the police department for the, extra traffic control that was taking place. Chief Bradford called me on Saturday and, or Sunday, and we had those conversations. So the fire department was involved, the police department was involved, Porter was involved, with some releases at the request of some of the commissioners. So it was kind of a, you know, not that we need a lot of dry runs, or, I mean, this was a pretty significant event in a concentrated area, but my impression was that there was very good coordination and cooperation amongst the departments working together on this. And I probably missed somebody in the process too, but I think you should be happy to know that they just responded. And they seemed like it was very natural for them to get in and take care of this stuff, and that's not the case everywhere. So you should be happy that that was kind of the reaction. Westar, I think, did a commendable job getting out. I saw a lot of Westar crews. You don't see that kind of response necessarily. And the other thing you have to understand about Westar is they've got a deployment in places, I think Florida and maybe even some still in Texas. So their crews are dispersed across the country, which utility companies do back and forth in their own mutual aid. So it was a significant group effort, and I was pleased and impressed with how we reacted.
I just add finally, just for the public that's watching, we will continue to be picking up if people can get their stuff to the curb. We don't want to drive big equipment into private property. And we'll do that throughout the week. We'll see where we're at the end of the week. The brush pile is also open over at 11th and Haskell. Go over there. It's free to drop off if you can manage to do that yourself, or just get it out to the curb, or give one of our departments a call if you just absolutely have no other options, because we do have other options available.
So, Chuck, Ted mentioned something about the railroad crossing. I guess you might talk to him about, that's when he was getting cut off. He was worried about people
Well,
on the tracks.
when they couldn't get through under the underpass,
Yeah.
they had to be detoured around. And,
Right.
and then what people were doing was they were just getting backed up from where they were accessing probably Lincoln Street back onto 2nd Street. You know, they were just waiting for the signal. And at that time, we did have another question about the signals. The signals do go into, we have battery backups on all the signals all over town. They do go into the battery operated mode, but that is basic mode. It loses all communications, and it basically just runs the signal in phases. So every phase gets time. So I think that's what it was. It's just backed up from 2nd Street again all the way back around, and people didn't leave the crossing open. Something that we probably need to be aware of, because there were with no electricity, those railroad crossing bucks don't work either.
Mhm.
So we probably, next time, we'll probably put that into our response, that
Yeah.
we need to have people stationed there to make sure people don't stop on those
Right.
tracks.
It was kind of a perfect, I was over in North Lawrence that evening right after the storm, and the problem with it that caused the backup primarily on Locust Street really was, it was sort of a perfect storm of events. Lincoln Street, which is one of the access points,
Yep.
not that you would have been able to get out anyway with the underpass closed there, but Lincoln Street had been closed at approximately 4th and Lincoln. And then on the opposite side, Elm had been closed at one spot because of debris blockage in the road, and the only route to escape effectively became Locust, where you've got that stoplight right in front of Johnny's. And so I know when I was over there, it backed up down Locust all the way to past like Frank's North Star, and I mean it was
So
kind of
coming back
incredible.
the other way, coming in.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
kind of incredible to see, really.
Yeah, it was backed up to 72 on the other side.
Yeah.
It was pretty tough. You know, I was there Saturday night just a little bit, and I was afraid I was becoming part of the problem, so I left. But I came back Sunday, and what I noticed was just the attitude of the citizens. I'd stop and talk to a few of them, and they were just so happy with the job that the city was doing. They were just so thankful, and it just seemed as though that they fed off of that, how the city reacted, as well as I think the city reacted, fed off, how positive the citizens were, and just how many people that came out just to help. They came with their chainsaws, their trucks, whatever, and they just showed up. And I thought that was great, and I really appreciate that.
You know, Chuck, one of the things that Ted was talking about when I visited with him yesterday, I think it was the diesel generator that is north of the depot there, that was used as a backup to the pump that's down in the underpass area there. Is that still there?
I have looked for it all day, and I have called everybody that I know. And earlier tonight, I told Ted, I said, I don't know of it, and nobody currently on staff knows of it.
Okay.
So he says, well, I think he told me it wasn't there now, but it was, and I can't tell you how long ago it was.
Okay. Just checking.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
I did recall one other agency, and that was Douglas County Emergency Management, that was involved. And I was out and I personally witnessed a potential OSHA complaint, and that was with Commissioner Amix attempting to saw a limb in that area. And so we're going to have to provide some commissioner training with serious tools.
Should have called me. I could have gotten off my roof.
All right, county tax foreclosures. We received notice that we have some lots in the Fairfield East development south of 23rd and east of O'Connell that will be coming up for tax foreclosure. These properties owe approximately $260,000, if I'm reading that correctly. And they will be coming on the normal process for tax foreclosure. We do take a look at these lots to determine if there's an interest on behalf of the city for affordable housing and other things. These are commercial, more commercial-oriented lots, not what we would consider very desirable for any kind of residential housing. And so we think it should probably go to tax foreclosure. That's a huge liability. I think with time, you know, the wave of development will hit that area, and these will actually get developed for commercial purposes. Maybe not initially as intensely as we would want, but it'll evolve over time, and there'll be a demand for the commercial, I'd hope, in that area. Advisory opinions, I wanted to point out, this is something that the city attorney and I had a discussion about. The Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission gives advisory opinions, and ultimately it's the obligation of our elected officials, our employees or candidates that are running for office. They can actually receive these opinions. Any person requesting and receiving an opinion and who acts in accordance with the opinion will be presumed to have complied with the law. So a lot of times I think that there may be a perception, and sometimes that's as significant as the reality of a conflict, to ask our city attorney for their opinion on something. She can express maybe a general kind of reaction, but I think to move that to a more independent review, as is suggested in this item, and have that independence, and then have the protection, if you get that opinion and you follow it, might be worth considering for all of you. And so I make that known, and I say it publicly so that candidates can know that as well, too.
Do they submit their opinions in writing?
It's my understanding that they'll actually publish these at some point.
They publish some of them, they don't publish all of them, but they will send a written letter in response.
Thank you.
Can you describe the process?
Basically, what you do is you contact the office and explain the situation and explain whether or not, ask them for an opinion regarding whether or not there is a conflict. And they will respond and say, yes, you have a conflict, do not participate in this. Or they'll say, there is no conflict here, you may go ahead and consider the matter. And you'll receive it in writing, and it will be a letter.
So if you want more information on that, I can have legal counsel prepare a summary for you so that you have that available to you.
That'd be good.
And we'll share it with the candidates as well.
That'd be good.
Okay? Special accounts payable year-end meeting. We just set the schedule, and we want to be able to hold a fairly short, quick special meeting at the end of the year to clear up any bills and accounts that we have to deal with at the end of the year. So we'll come back probably on the next agenda with a consent item to set this, but I wanted to give you a heads up that would be coming.
I did talk to Vice Mayor Boley about that because, of course, Christmas is a very busy time for work for me.
Right.
So in case I'm not able to attend, then he
Right.
plans to be able to.
Okay. And maybe, we'll give you the date, and then you can kind of know in advance of the meeting to know if you're going to be around then, so that we have a quorum to deal with that. But that's not an unusual process for us. I'm going to skip over the monthly utility billing and fire med reports. You have those in detail. The Arts Common project related to 9th and New Hampshire TIF districts. I'm just going to read a couple of comments from this. The city's agreements on the tax increment financing district at 9th and New Hampshire envisioned an Arts Common project. Acquisition of the Salvation Army property on the south side of the Lawrence Arts Center for future use by Lawrence Arts Center as green space and programming space. And I know that those discussions have been going on behind the scenes between the Arts Center and the Salvation Army, and I think the Salvation Army probably has a site in mind for a facility, an upgraded facility for themselves. The city didn't budget to front the funds required to proceed with the project, but in discussions with the Lawrence Arts Center, it appears they're willing to move forward on their own to acquire the property, subject to an agreement between the Lawrence Arts Center and the city regarding the 5% TIF revenues to fund the project. That's what, was contemplated, is that 5% would be made available for that purpose. It was also discovered there are some discrepancies in the existing agreements between the dates required to initiate this project. There's more than one district involved, and so what we're trying to do is get alignment between the two of them so that it works to everybody's benefit in the end. So you'll be seeing some of this legislation coming forward in the not-too-distant future. We're working with bond counsel at this time to make some proposed revisions to those agreements that would clarify these issues and add the standard audit language that we included in the ORIAD agreement, and we're trying to do that with all of our agreements as we get to them. Staff will work with the developers involved to gain their feedback on proposed revisions and bring a future item back to the Commission.
I did want to mention, we talked about Monday, that maybe this is also a good time to look at them perhaps taking ownership of their own current building as well at this time.
Yeah, that's one of the things, and that comes off of the suggestion that maybe what they should do is own their property by themselves, and then the conversation came up, well, maybe what we should do is have a conversation with them. I think there's some legal issues as to how that was transpired, so we'll have to address that. This is kind of critical to get this going, but we will have the conversation because there's a clock running on this particular issue. The Santa Fe Station project was bid in September. We didn't get any bids. The project is being revised in order to address concerns expressed by potential contractors, and we're on course to rebid this project in November through the KDOT, Kansas Department of Transportation. You have a report on the August monthly permits. I won't go into that in detail. I found some interesting stats on employment forecast. In 2018, Kansas total non-farm employment is projected to increase by 0.1%, adding approximately 1,500 jobs. The production sectors are projected to decline by 0.3% in Kansas, contracting by over 700 jobs in 2018. The trade, transportation, utility sector's employment is expected to grow by 0.2%, adding approximately 600 new jobs. Service sector by 0.4% growth, adding approximately 2,700 jobs. And the government sector is expected to decline by 1,000 jobs in 2018. My math gives me 1,600 jobs added, not the 1,500, but there's probably some percentage calculation that didn't get made, or I'm missing something there, but it's close in terms of the two numbers that they've expressed. National employment, by the way, increased by 1.5% in the last 12 months, while Kansas employment has declined by 0.8% over the same period of time, a decrease of approximately 10,800 jobs. There's a Mark article on job growth that I have included in your packet as well, and I thought I was going to make just a couple comments on that. For a number of years, it was not uncommon for the Kansas side of the metro to be the job growth leader. In fact, from January 12 to January 15, the Kansas side generated 56% of the metro's total growth in jobs. Since then, the Missouri side has seen employment growth surge, while employment growth on the Kansas side has slowed considerably. From September 2015 to 17, 78% of the metro's employment growth was in Missouri. Missouri has been adding about 50,000 new jobs a year lately, while employment change has actually turned negative in Kansas. So those are some interesting reviews in terms of what's going on in our area. It probably has to do a lot with state policy and maybe the aggressiveness of our neighboring state in terms of how they're developing business as well. But I thought you'd appreciate knowing some of those stats that are out there. In terms of future agendas, on the November 7th, the next agenda on consent, we have the second final reading for the ordinance on the Vermont Place Neighborhood Revitalization Area, the ordinance on repealing the Joint Economic Development Council, and the ordinance reassigning the former Joint Economic Development Councils to PERC, their responsibilities.
Tom?
Yeah.
For the NRA, since that's something that I would just poll so I could vote no against? Would it be better for it to go ahead and be on the regular agenda?
Yeah,
or
if you're
would
going to
it be
vote
better-
that way, then we'll just set it up that way.
Okay.
That's fine. Although there could be something that happens, between now and then that should change your mind. So. Always keep that open. All right, next is the future work session items. 11:14, we're planning a strategic plan update, which we've been promising you. Short-term rental ordinance, what we refer to as the B&B ordinance. 12:12 is the downtown conference center proposal, and income-based utility rate options. And we have a number of things still on the list. So that's my report for this evening.
Excellent, thank you.
Mhm.
So now we're on to calendar. Any items to add to the calendar? There's the graduations already on there. Anything else to add? Okay, so I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made by Mayor Soden, seconded by Commissioner Herbert. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.